Acharya Ashtatar Shishman. His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Govinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Somebody pull this up. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, text number 19. Na etat chitram tvai kshatah badarayana viryaje grihitah ananya bhavena yat tvaya harihi Ishvaraha Naitachchitram Tvaikshatar Badarayana Vir Yaje Grihito Nanya Bhavena Yatvaya Haririshvaraha Naitachchitram Tvaikshatar Badarayana Viryaje Grihito Nanya Bhavena Yatvaya Haririshvaraha Naitachchitram Tvaikshatar Badarayana Viryaje Grihito Nanya Bhavena Yatvaya Haririshvaraha. Please repeat.
Naitachchitram Tvaikshatar Badarayana Viryaje Grihito Nanya Bhavena Yatvaya Haririshvaraha
Naitachchitram Tvaikshatar Badarayana Viryaje Grihito Nanya Bhavena Yatvaya Haririshvaraha
Naitachchitram Tvaikshatar Badarayana Viryaje Grihito Nanya Bhavena Yatvaya Hari Ishvaraha Naitachchitram Tvaikshatar Badarayana Viryaje Grihito Nanya Bhavena Yatvaya Haririshvaraha.
Mataji?
Naitachchitram Tvaikshatar Badarayana Viryaje Grihito Nanya Bhavena Yatvaya Haririshvaraha.
Na. Never. Etat. Such inquiries. Chitram. Very wonderful. Tvai. In you. Kshataha. Ovidura. Badarayana. Vyasadeva. Viryaje. Born from the semen. Grihitaha. Accepted. Ananya Bhavena. Without deviation from the thought.
without deviation from the thought.
Yet,
Yet,
because
because
Tvaya,
Tvaya,
by you,
by you,
Harihi,
Harihi,
the personality of Godhead,
personality of Godhead,
Ishvaraha,
Ishvaraha,
the Lord. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. O Vidura, it is not at all wonderful that you have so accepted the Lord without deviation of thought, for you were born from the semen of Vyasadeva. The value of great parentage and noble birth is evaluated here in connection with the birth of Vidura. The culture of a human being begins when the father invests his semen in the womb of the mother. According to his status of work, a living entity is placed in a particular father's semen, and because Vidura was not an ordinary living entity, he was given the chance to be born from the semen of Vyasa. The birth of a human being is a great science, and therefore reformation of the act of impregnation, according to the Vedic ritual called Garbhadhana Samskara, is very important for generating good population. The problem is not to check the growth of the population, but to generate good population on the level of Vidura, Vyasa, and Maitreya. There is no need to check the growth of population if the children are born as human beings without precautions regarding their birth. So-called birth control is not only vicious but also useless. Om Agyana Timurandasya Gananjana Shalakya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutali Swayamrupa Gada Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Taparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Rakanatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Fitamshcha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopsha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishada Bhanusute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Vanchakalpatu Bhishcha Kripasinubhi Vacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Putarishmati Bhakti Vikasa Swamin Itinamane Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Putarishmati Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Itinamane Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavari Pashkyati Yadishitarne Bhutera Mahadbiri Mafpura Vivor Nirmaya Sheti Yad Amusha Purashaha Bhunkti Gunan Shurasha Shodashatmaka Solanga Shishta Bhagavan Vashamsi Me. So there's some festivals today. There's 4 of them. First is Sri Krishna Rasa Yatra. It's just another of Krishna's rasa dances throughout the year. There's 2. There's Sharad Purnima, which came earlier. And today's Purnima day, the full moon day of Kartik, Damodar Mas. So there's also a rasa dance today, basically. Quite simple. Other one, Tulasi Shalagram Vivaha, marriage, the marriage ceremony of Tulasi Shalagram. I'm not going to speak on this. There's different versions. The Hindus have one version. The Hindus have one version. We have a different version, and I haven't read it before, so I didn't want to cram it just a few seconds. We have books on it. We have books on Tulasi Devi. A few of them, I think. You can read those books if you're interested. I don't want to speak about something I'm not knowledgeable about. Other one, Sri Nimbarkacharya, his appearance day. So I know a little bit about him, so I put together some notes on him. So Nimbarkacharya, he's the founder, I guess you could say, of one of the 4 prominent Vaishnava Sampradayas. There's Vishnu Swami, Sri, Brahma Sampradaya, and then Nimbarka Sampradaya. And he's probably the least... Vishnu Swami is also a little bit obscure, you could say. Mainly Sri and Brahma Madhvas and Sri Sampradaya, the most prominent ones. Vishnu Swami a little bit less. Nimbarka is quite obscure, although his Sampradaya is still around. It's not as widely spread. He propagated the philosophy of Dvaita Advaita, and it's very similar, at least in its current form, to our own philosophy of difference and non-difference. I mean, literally the word, you can take it like that. Dual and yet non-dual. So anyway, I'll get to that a little bit later. And Nimbarka himself, he appeared, he was a Shaktiyavesh avatar. Vishnu personally sent him to this world at the end of Dwapar Yuga to establish a sampradaya in the age of Kali. So he appeared thousands of years ago. His disciplic succession, first is Narayana, Krishna himself. Then after that comes Hamsa Avatar, who then spoke to the four Kumaras, which then spoke to Narada Muni, which then initiated Nimbarkacharya, or sometimes his name is also Nimba Aditya, is also given sometimes. So Nimbarkacharya is actually a disciple of Narada Muni, even though generally we take it as, we sometimes refer to the Kumara Sampradaya, something like that. Directly he took, the Kumaras are there in the Sampradaya, directly he took initiation from Narada Muni. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gives this disciplic succession there. And he gives a full disciplic succession actually, but I'll get to that. So Lord Chaitanya, he took from this Sampradaya, I'm just glossing over the teachings. The teachings as it's currently manifest are very similar to our teachings. There may be a reason for that. So Lord Chaitanya took from the Nimbarka Sampradaya two elements which are very prominent in ours. First is taking exclusive shelter of Radharani, and second thing is the importance, I guess you can say, given to the feelings of the gopi's love for Krishna, gopi bhav, in other words. So Lord Chaitanya took these two elements for the Nimbarka Sampradaya and he incorporated it into his own philosophy. Nimbarka Sampradaya is quite similar, at least you see those who practice it. There's many things to be said. Nimbarka has books. He has a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, which is definitely known to be authored by him. There's other books that his own Sampradaya ascribed to him. It could be authored by him, could not be authored by him. Anyway, I won't go on so much of a controversial bent, but so Nimbarka Sampradaya philosophy is quite similar to our philosophy, and there may be a reason for that. So Nimbarka, well, some people, some devotees even, they say that Nimbarka Acharya didn't exist, that actually who existed is Nimbaditya, who appeared at this end of Dwapar Yuga and established the Sampradaya. It may be something like that, possibly, that's one explanation. It may not be. A more conservative explanation, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains. And also, we also see Madhvacharya, he wrote one book. It's called Sarva Darshana Sangraha. Basically, darshana, just like we have the 6 darshans, like that, the 6 philosophies. So Madhvacharya in this book, he analyzes a whole bunch of different philosophies at the time. He talks about his own philosophy, Tattvavad. He talks about the philosophy of Sri Sampradaya. He talks about different strains of Shaivism, impersonalism, the different strains that go with that, Jainism, Buddhism. He talks about all sorts of philosophies, but he doesn't mention Nimbarkacharya there. So that's one point. Another thing, Jiva Goswami in his Sandarbhas, he mentions, or even Mayavad philosophy he talks about, he quotes Shankaracharya's philosophy. He'll quote from his commentaries as well, or at least refer to his commentaries. And he'll mention Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, and Vishnu Swami within his Sandarbhas, but he never once mentions Nimbarkacharya within his commentaries. So therefore, some people doubt whether the current... In other words, some people think there's 2 Nimbarkas. Some people think that the current manifestation of the Sampradaya is sort of a resurfacing of the original Sampradaya. One point is maybe his philosophy was not very widespread. Maybe Jiva Goswami didn't mention his name because he may not have been so well acquainted. His philosophy may not have been prominent within that area of India, which is mainly Vrindavan area, North India at the time, or even Bengal. The Gaudiya generally community, Nimbarka's philosophy may not have been known. So that's one explanation. As to why Madhva didn't include it, I can't exactly say. So it could be, some people think, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, I'm kind of reiterating what he says. Some people think that the current Nimbarka Sampradaya is a resurfaced Sampradaya. It died out, it went extinct, although it was definitely established at the end of Dwapar Yuga, and definitely the philosophy of Nimbaditya is Dvaita Advaita. He established that philosophy based upon the instructions given to him by the Kumaras, which you can find in detail in the 7th chapter, I think, at the Chandogya Upanishad. So all that's true. He definitely existed. The current manifestation of the Sampradaya, it could or could not be the same that was originally established. In other words, the line could have been broken at some point. So definitely the current philosophy of the Sampradaya is quite shaped by Lord Chaitanya. It's touched by the Lord Chaitanya's own philosophy, if you look at it. And we have even, among the acharyas listed, we have here, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he gives the disciplic succession. And his commentary on the Chaitanya Bhagavat, he also talks a little bit about this. Anyway, he gives this long disciplic succession coming from Nimbaditya Acharya. Sorry, I mispronounced that. So anyway, we have this coming down. He has as the 34th Keshava Bhatta, who's Keshav Kashmiri. For those of you who have read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Keshava Kashmiri, Digvijay Pandit, on Chaitanya Bhagavat, he's called. So some of you know the story. I won't reiterate it. He basically came to Navadvip and he had a debate with Lord Chaitanya, and Lord Chaitanya defeated him. So he was ultimately defeated by Lord Chaitanya, and he took shelter of Lord Chaitanya, although it's said that he kind of drifted more towards the Nimbarka Sampradaya rather than Lord Chaitanya's Sampradaya. And within his Chaitanya Bhagavat commentary, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur mentions that he established conclusions different from those of Lord Chaitanya. So he's listed as, he definitely has association. I mean, here Acharya takes him as an Acharya of the Nimbarka Sampradaya. So it definitely seems, and it continues from him. There's other people who have descended from him, and he gives a list like that up to the present day, or at least presumably his present day, 100 years ago or so. So definitely the philosophy today is shaped by Keshava Kashmiri's interaction with Lord Chaitanya. Yeah, so I'm not giving specific details because this is kind of what my limited knowledge of it. But so that's a little bit on Nimbarka Acharya. Then also, last day of Bhishma Panchaka. Bhishma Panchaka, nobody's talked about this here. It's a little controversial thing. Different people in the society view it differently. It wasn't observed during the time of Srila Prabhupada, nor did people even really know. I don't even think it was on the calendar at the time of Srila Prabhupada. It's difficult to find information on this festival or this thing on the calendar. Usually when you look it up and I haven't seen it mentioned in any book I'm not so widely read, I just haven't seen it mentioned in any books. Definitely not within Srila Prabhupada's books is there. If you look up online, there's the description of how Bhishma Dev, he was fasting for 5 days, and these 5 days, at the end of Kartik Mas, he left his body at the end of the 5 days. But this doesn't really tally up with the description that's given in the Bhagavatam, because even Mahabharata, because Bhishma Dev left his body in the Uttarayana period, which is the period, basically like when the sun is going on the northern course. So basically, Bhishma left his body after the winter solstice. And we haven't reached the winter solstice yet. So it doesn't really add up in my mind. Therefore, some people are a little doubtful as to exactly the authenticity of it. Some people observe it. I won't comment further. I'm just saying it doesn't quite line up. This explanation of being the 5 Bhishma, culminating in the day that Bhishma left his body, it doesn't seem to line up with, like, if you take it according to the description of the Bhagavatam Mahabharata. So that's a little on that. Some people fast for this, and there's descriptions. You may can do so. I don't know. I will first look into the authenticity of the event before doing so. So yeah, that's a little on the festivals. As far as the Bhagavatam verse, so Ovidura, it is not at all wonderful that you have so accepted the Lord without deviation of thought, for you were born from the semen of Vyasadeva. So I wanted to read one verse related to this. I think we read this. I feel like we read this recently, but I guess it was some time ago. You can pull up Bhagavatam 2:3-15. There was another verse I was looking for, but I couldn't find it. We can just go to the translation. And I'll read from the purport a little bit as well. Maharaj Parikshit, the grandson of the Pandavas, was from his very childhood a great devotee of the Lord. Even while playing with dolls, he used to worship Lord Krishna by imitating the worship of the family deity. Prabhupada says in the in the Gita, it is stated that even a person who has failed in the proper discharge of yoga practice is given a chance to take birth in the house of devout brahmanas or in the house of rich men like Kshatriya kings or rich merchants. But Maharaj Parikshit was more than that because he had been a great devotee of the Lord since his previous birth. Similar situation with Vidura. He's a Yamaraj. He's already a pure devotee. He's a Mahajana. And as such, he took birth in an imperial family of the Kurus, and especially that of the Pandavas, very similar to Vidura. So from the very beginning of his childhood, he had the chance to know intimately the devotional service of Lord Krishna in his own family. The Pandavas, all being devotees of the Lord, certainly venerated family deities in the royal palace for worship. Children who appear in such families, fortunately, generally imitate such worship of the deities, even in the way of childhood play. By the grace of Lord Sri Krishna, Prabhupada gives his own example, we had the chance of being born in a Vaishnava family. And in our childhood, we imitated the worship of Lord Krishna by imitating our father. Our father encouraged us in all respects to observe all functions, such as Ratha Yatra, Dola Yatra ceremonies, and he used to spend money liberally for distributing prasad to us children and our friends. Our spiritual master, who also took his birth in the Vaishnava family, got all inspirations from his great Vaishnava father, Thakur Bhaktivinoda. That is the way of all lucky Vaishnava families. The celebrated Mirabai was a staunch devotee of Lord Krishna as the great lifter of Govardhan Hill. That's kind of a side point. But this point, I thought of this verse when I was reading this about Vidura because the lineage is quite similar, and the background is quite similar. Maitreya saying here to Vidura is not very wonderful that you can think of Krishna constantly because you're born from Vyasadeva. You can take this in two ways. There are many different ways you can take it. One thing in the word here used is virya, which can refer to semen. It can also refer to potency. Even in English, that kind of like we call somebody like impotent if somebody is not fertile, basically. So even in English, that kind of like the similarity of the words is there. So Vyasadeva is a very powerful personality. He's a Shakti-avesh avatar. So it's not very surprising that his offspring is also completely Krishna conscious. Not a very surprising thing. Another angle you could take it at is that Vyasadeva is a great Vaishnava, which he is in one sense. So it's not very surprising that he's a Muni himself. So it's not very surprising that his offspring is Krishna conscious. Vidura especially, I won't get into so much of the background, but Vidura was specifically endowed at the time of his birth. Vyasadeva blessed his mother Vyasadeva would bless Vidura, we'll just say it like that he would be greatly intelligent. So Vidura is specifically endowed with a great deal of intelligence, whereas his brothers got some sort of Pandu and Dhritarashtra. They had some, because anyway, I won't get into the history of the Mahabharata, but we can just understand this, that Vidura is very, very intelligent. And we see in his dealings, his advising, he's very keen and very observant throughout the Mahabharata. That's also given in Bhagavatam in a little bit. His advising, Gita as well, I don't think it's mentioned in Gita, at least in the purports. Bhagavatam, it's mentioned that we have Vidura giving good advice to Dhritarashtra and also Duryodhana. But they don't accept it. Vidura, he can foresee situations. Quite often he'll foresee situations, foresee disaster, because of his greatly... just like Vidura, he saved the Pandavas from being burned in the house of lac. We have this story in the Bhagavatam. He foresaw this was happening. He could understand Duryodhana's moves and how he was going to act. So similarly, he could also understand that Duryodhana's actions would annihilate the whole Kuru dynasty. And he tried to forewarn him of this many times. So he was a very intelligent personality, both materially and also spiritually. A few different things here. And I'll connect it with this, which I just read. Srila Prabhupada writes, the value of great parentage and noble birth is evaluated here in connection with the birth of Vidura. The culture of a human being begins when the father invests his semen in the womb of the mother. Yeah, specifically, he was born from Vyasa. I've made this point. The birth of a human being is a great science, and therefore reformation of the act of impregnation, according to the Vedic ritual called Garbhadhana Samskara, is very important for generating a good population. So we see, it's very important, Garbhadhana Samskara. We see, for example, as is being mentioned here, Maharaj Parikshit, what an exalted birth he got. Not necessarily just because he was coming in a good family, but because also that family observed all points of culture. Samskara, actually. Srila Prabhupada uses this word here in this verse, but sorry, I'm just looking for it. Okay, anyway, it's not coming out to me immediately. I thought I read it before. But anyway, this samskara, I've spoken this previously, that samskara, these points of culture, cultural reformation of one, of a living entity. I spoke on this before, so I won't reiterate so much. But according to the Vedic system, throughout one's life, there's different rituals you can not exactly translation, not exactly exact translation, reformatory ritual. You can take it something like a purificatory ritual. So a human being is meant to undergo different samskaras. The first being is Garbhadhana Samskara. And the result of this Garbhadhana Samskara is that a pious, not just pious, but spiritually elevated living entity is attracted to the womb of the mother. We have in the fourth canto, I think, third or fourth canto, maybe third canto, of the pregnancy of Aditi in the evening. And we hear that Kashyapa and Aditi, they copulated at an improper time during the evening sandhya, which is an inauspicious time, at least was described there. And there is described there are many, either in the Bhagavatam or Prabhupada's purports, there are many inauspicious living entities in the ether, you can say. And the result of such of a union, an auspicious union at such a time, was that demons were born from Aditi, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. So, even though Aditi I don't know so much about, she was influenced by lust at the time, granted. That doesn't necessarily make her a demon or anything of that nature. I mean, she's the wife of Kashyapa Muni. Kashyapa Muni himself, at least according to the Bhagavatam, we have that in a previous verse, Vasudeva, Krishna's father, was previously Kashyap. So you can get an idea of his position. And also, Kashyapa is also not only the father of Hiranyakashipu, he's also we also have Diti, so he's also the father of the demigods. He's the father of Vamandev, specifically. So he's simultaneously he has the qualification to be the father of the Supreme Lord Vamanadev, but also because of, he himself is an elevated devotee, but because of not observing proper these rituals, these purificatory processes, the result was that he had demons of the level of Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu born from him. So one may be a very great devotee, one may be even elevated in his devotional practices, but that doesn't guarantee, if you neglect these samskaras, that you'll have good offspring, we can see. You can have demoniac offspring. The result of good offspring, I just read here, Maharaj Parikshit, we see from his birth, he was inclined to worship the Lord. He was born into a good family. He was inclined to worship the Lord. He was worshiping the deities playing with dolls from his very birth. So Vidura, similarly, he was naturally inclined to worship Krishna from a very early age because of his good birth and because, etc. like that. He also born in a good family, good upbringing like that. So this Garbhadhana Samskara is necessary to generate a good population. Otherwise, you get Varna Samskara. I mean, what is that? Varna Sankara, sorry. As is talked about in Gita. Arjuna, his among his concerns was that the family tradition, Kula Dharma, will be destroyed. Family traditions will be destroyed, and then the women will be polluted, and then from that, from Varna Sankara, I'm getting the words confused. Varna Sankara will come from that. So these traditions, Arjuna was scared that these things would be neglected, and from this, unwanted population will come about. Srila Prabhupada talks about this, that there's no need to check the growth of the population if the children are born as human beings, in other words, not as animals, with all precautions regarding their birth. Unfortunately, most people nowadays are born as animals, not as human beings. So-called birth control is not only vicious, but also useless. So a lot could be said about that. Maybe I'll talk about that in a little bit, but that's a good one-liner. So Arjuna was even considering these, even though he's a kshatriya, he's a ruler, he was considering these things even on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, actually. There's different samskaras one goes through. One of the most important is this Garbhadhana samskara, because from the very beginning, it determines the quality of the soul that's being attracted to the womb. At least one devotee has told me that they had, I don't know how many children they had, at least two, we can say like that. And for the first child, they were very strict in observing Garbhadhana samskara. And I think maybe I'm getting confused. Anyway, for the first, they were very strict in observing this samskara. And they noticed, or the first, I think they weren't so strict with observing the samskara. And the result was that they noticed their child is the child is still young, but the child is a little unruly, a little unsubmissive. And the second child that conceived, they were very strict in observing Garbhadhana samskara. And they noticed this child, naturally, they're inclined towards the devotional service. They're inclined towards engaging in kirtan. They're submissive. Of course, being submissive is not in of itself means you become Krishna conscious, but it's generally a good quality. Though here they're inclined to hear Bhagavatam, hear stories about Krishna, engage in kirtan, play with dolls of Krishna, etc. Things like this. Whereas the other one is more, you could say, mischievous, like this. So whether or not be, but they remarked that they could notice a difference in their own children, in the mentalities of their own children. Their children are still young, so it's hard to say completely, but by the process of observing, or not observing the Garbhadhana samskara, it's definitely there. It's a scientific process, and you see like that. As stated in a Shastra. You can test it if you so like. I don't advise it. Better to follow these things strictly, because you get a result from doing so. Not just Garbhadhana samskara, that's also there. There's a lot that could be said in the raising and bringing one up in Krishna consciousness. There's many different samskaras. Most are during one's childhood. Namakarna, Anaprashna, Upanayana. Many of these take place. Name giving. We have in Bhagavatam Krishna also undergoing these things. They're Vedic. They're meant to be practiced. Name giving ceremony. We have, for example, the day after the calculation of the chart, the astrological chart. This was done for Krishna. Lord Chaitanya too, same exact thing. The name-giving ceremony, the giving of the sacred thread, and the entrance into the study in the Vedas. So I don't know them all. I don't exactly know them all. The eating of the first grains, cutting of the first hair, the ceremony, I forget the name of it, where you place before the child different items. What is that? What is that? Yeah, things like Bhagavatam. You know this, bro. What is that? Bhagavatam, money, something. Rasikananda, he also. What is this? Bhagavatam, money. Then, what are the other two items? Do you recall?
Money, and then land also means mud also they keep.
Uh-huh.
I've seen different things.
Different things, according to,
Tables also kept. Like we did
Uh-huh.
we did. Tables and money.
Mm-hmm.
Bhagavatam is kept. And some land, piece of land.
Mm-hmm. And the idea is that you put these items before the child, and what the child first grabs for or reaches for, takes, it will indicate the mentality of the child. And actually, it's like that. We see, for example, in the story of Rasikananda, for those of you who read it, we see when he was undergoing this samskar, he reached for the Bhagavatam. He embraced the Bhagavatam after that. And we see he was such a learned scholar in the Bhagavatam. He was fluent. Many things could be said. He was fluent in Sanskrit himself. He was a very highly learned scholar, even though generally we emphasize he didn't write so much. I don't know if he wrote so much at all. So these things are important. these samskaras are very, very important. Not just this first Garbhadhana samskara. Srila Prabhupada writes a lot about Garbhadhana samskara within his books. He doesn't so much get into detail that we can get from elsewhere, from different devotees, also different shastras. Generally, anyway, yeah, I'll just leave that point because I'm not so learned with that. But there's also different samskaras that children are also meant to undergo. Unfortunately, most of us have missed this opportunity. It's okay. By taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, even if one is coming from has missed the chance, you can say, to have a cultured background, one can still become cultured and become reformed by the mercy of the spiritual master. So one encouraging point. Another thing is that it's not too late. There's other samskaras in life. There's two more, generally, after later in life. Vivaha, that means that marriage ceremony, is a samskara. And you see, it's a whole huge affair. Practically, it's a festival. Sometimes it's a bigger festival than what we have. Some marriages are bigger festivals than those festivals we observe in Krishna consciousness. Their marriages go on for days and days and days, and there's so many. They put up these big, huge pandals, and there's huge feasts, and each day there's something different going on. I haven't gone. I've just heard about these things. So it's a big event. It's a big event because it gives an impression within the mind. So we can also undergo these things if we're so inclined. If we're looking into getting married, we should undergo the proper samskaras for doing so. Of course, it's not the be-all, end-all. It's not that you undergo the samskara and it's all is well and good within your marriage life. It may help do so. Of course, there's different things. I won't so much get into that, but we should observe these cultural points because they will help them. Another one we will all hopefully have at the end of life, the funeral rites. And there's different things for this. I won't go into so much detail. Generally, we scatter ashes either in holy places. Sometimes it's have elevated personalities. Sometimes it's put into samadhi. Generally, quite often, devotees will have their ashes spread in the Ganga. Even non-devotees, generally, that's the method we see, for example. Or some holy place like that. We see in Puri, there's, what is that? Something Dwar. Swarga Dwar, yeah, where they cremate the bodies. So there's a samskara even at the end of life. The idea that it purifies the consciousness. It gets you, if not back home, back to Godhead, at least it prepares you to not avoid taking an animal birth, we can say like that. So as far as these early samskaras, mainly these are the main point, and these kind of like shape one's consciousness within life. Vidura presumably underwent all of these things. Coming from Vyasadev's son, and he's coming from an imperial family too, so presumably these things were followed to the T. These samskaras, it provides a good culture for the child. It's not just a ritual. Of course, they're not only the only consideration, I'll say that, is you can go as possible to follow Garbhadhana samskaras strictly, and even go through all the other processes, but that doesn't necessarily the child will be Krishna conscious. It's the reality of the world, what to do. Just like we're hearing about Vidura, he had great parentage. Vyasadeva was his father. Vyasadeva was also Dhritarashtra's father. But you see what happened with Dhritarashtra. Same parentage. Of course, there was different circumstances there with his mother and things. I won't go into detail. But the father was the same. They had the same opportunity growing up. They grew up in pretty similar, practically the same imperial family, you could say like that. But one turned out one way, another turned out the other way. So there's always, even though you can do so much, there's always the individual karma, you can take it like that, as the child, and also their own individual free will. Another example, Advaita Acharya, his sons, he had 3, I think, sons, headed by Chutananda, 3 sons that were faithful to Lord Chaitanya, and then I think 3 sons who rejected Lord Chaitanya's teachings. And we don't even have their names. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami doesn't even give their names. So Advaita Acharya, he's God. He's Mahavishnu himself. You can't get more than that, but even he had sons which rejected Lord Chaitanya or deviated from Lord Chaitanya. So there's always a consideration. We can follow everything. We can try and do everything that we can for children in Krishna consciousness. We should, to the T, as far as possible, but we should always be prepared that They're their own person. They have to fly their own plane. Just like people come into Krishna consciousness, we tell them this. So similarly for our children. A lot could be spoken on this. I'm just making broad points here. One point in general is that it's very important to how children are raised in Krishna consciousness, because as is said in this verse dealing with Maharaj Parikshit, that he got that impression from an early age. And getting that impression of early age, I mean, even here, it's being said, it's not very wonderful that Vidura was constantly in thought of Lord Krishna. Why? Because he was born from Vyasa. He was coming from a Vaishnava family. So naturally, he was Krishna conscious like that. So, devotee children, they have a very good opportunity to be Krishna conscious, more so than even sometimes devotees who have been practicing for years. Because of a devotee practicing for years, because of his unfortunate background, we can say like that, he may be inclined towards sense gratification, or he may be have some weakness of heart that may not otherwise be there. We quite often see devotees slip, even though they may not even want to do it, because of weakness of heart. They may fall back into past bad habits because of, we can say, an unfortunate upbringing. We can say it like that. Of course, some of us haven't. It's not that association with drugs, illicit sex, intoxication, so many different things. We could point out so many different things. But if a person is made immune from this from a very early age, it makes a remarkable difference for their whole life, basically. Just like I was speaking, when I was in India, I met, there's so many Gurukulis in India, actually. I met two older ones who were now practically adults, and they told me, even now, they feel like they won't associate with women at all. They feel it's strange even to be around women, to speak around, not just be around women, not like that, but to, they won't approach women independently. They won't speak with them in a separate, alone place. They'll always go with something like that. Because that culture is there, the Vedic culture is there. Of course, I mean, I've been practicing for so many years, I'm still haunted by so many anarthas. So, you see, just this culture, it provides one in supporting one's Krishna consciousness and keeping one on the platform, as Prabhupada is saying here, they're born as human beings. In other words, if somebody's born as an animal, to elevate them from the animal birth to the platform of a human is very, very difficult. And at any time, they can slip back into animal propensities, animalistic propensities. But if from the beginning they're given this chance of culture, samskara, to enter into this Vedic culture of samskara, is a very, very fortunate birth. Krishna in Gita, he says, we were just reading from the other purport, this Srimatam, what is that? Shuchinam Srimatam Gehi. So, in the next verse after this, Krishna says, the unsuccessful yogi, sorry, that's that verse. Or if unsuccessful after long yoga practice, he takes birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely in great wisdom. Certainly, such a birth is rare in this world. So Krishna himself says such a birth in a devotee household is very, very, very rare. For those who are taking birth within the Krishna conscious movement or any Vaishnava family, is a very, very, very rare birth, a very valuable opportunity, actually. And those who are doing so, they're elevated spiritual personalities, even though it may not immediately appear like that. So we should take care of them for multiple reasons. One, we don't know who they are. As Mr. Prabhu was making the point, actually, it's true, actually. It's completely true. Philosophically, it's completely true. Even a child can be more advanced in Krishna conscious than somebody who's been in the movement for 50 years. It's possible because we don't know their consciousness. It may not be manifest. Nobody could understand Srila Prabhupada's exalted nature in Krishna consciousness, even well into his age, actually. Even among his godbrothers, they didn't necessarily understand. So it's easy to take for granted one's position in Krishna consciousness, especially when one is in the body of a child. We don't know their position. Another sense, in terms of spreading Krishna consciousness, of course that's there. It's not that we give up spreading Krishna consciousness, but almost more effective than bringing people in. Or we can say it like this. It's easier to raise, or that's also difficult. It's easier to raise a child to be Krishna conscious and maintain that Krishna conscious in one way than it is bringing people from a completely alien culture into Krishna consciousness. Because from the beginning, at least in one sense, it's a blank slate. Although they have their own karma, and they do have a background, it's not a completely blank slate. On one level, it's like a blank slate. They can take it up very, very easily, and it's very natural for them. When I was in India, I saw, just like on the farms I saw in Kurmagram, they have a Gurukul there, and there's many boys living there, and they just accept they've grown up there on a farm without electricity. They engage in kirtan every single day. They work. Well, they have different occupations. Some make clothes. Some work in the field, and that's just their way of life. They've grown up. They know. That's just how it is. That's life for them. For particularly myself, Krishna consciousness can seem something like something imposed. It's not an artificial imposition of the mind, though sometimes it may seem like it, because when our mind is conditioned to this. Towards materialistic society, then we view as Krishna consciousness not as the innate tendency of the soul, but as something that's very difficult to practice. It's very difficult to practice the four regular principles for somebody whose whole life is shaped by, whose whole life is not following the four regular principles. But if one grows up in an atmosphere as such, it's just natural. It's just how you live. It's almost like just as easily and naturally as one speaks English by having it as one's native tongue versus learning the language from scratch. Something like that, to give a bad example. So, yeah, even in terms of spreading Krishna consciousness, it's very valuable taking care of bearing children in Krishna consciousness and protecting them and giving them, raising them very nicely. In one sense, religions, historically, although we hear of things like Christianity and Islam being spread by conquering and like that, by preaching like that, that was definitely there, and that definitely had an influence. But definitely in another sense, the propagation of those religions were more so just by procreation, more or less. People took birth in some sort of Christian or Muslim household. Of course, these are materially contaminated religions, but we see even they flourish by such a thing. So too, Krishna consciousness, and generally most people are simple, actually. Even in the West, most people are simple. You see that culture, and specifically that religion is also culture, that people are born into, people stay within, generally speaking. Unless one is a thinking person, one doesn't question things in life, generally. So you see quite often people are born into Christianity, they just remain as Christian. They don't know why they believe in Christianity. They may not even know what the Bible says. They may have not even read the thing. But that's their culture. That's what they're born into. Same thing with all religions. Krishna consciousness, of course, we don't encourage blind faith like that. But I'm just making the point, if one is born into it, that generally people don't leave unless something extraordinary. It happens in extraordinary cases and also a few other cases, but it's not the norm. So even in terms of expanding Krishna consciousness, preaching Krishna consciousness, even raising a family within Krishna consciousness is also a form of preaching, making one's own family devotees. Of course, you could take it the other side, but I'm not going to get into that right now. There's the other, you could say the counterforce of that, of being overly attached to family affairs. I'm not going to touch on that right now as a separate class. But so yeah, it's important to spread Krishna consciousness. Our main facets for spreading Krishna consciousness are books and farms. Prabhupada gave it like that. But it's also important to educate our children in Krishna consciousness. Gurukul is also a very important thing. Because otherwise you can, if you establish, farms also includes, as per Srila Prabhupada's conceptions, includes things like Gurukul, etc. like that. But if you have a temple, just going on, you can do, in other words, if the society of devotees, literally society is just only that, and as at one point it was, and only giving Krishna consciousness to others is emphasized. It's not that we take that away, and also we impart that to our children as well. But if facility isn't given to children, then it puts a limited lifespan on the survival of Krishna consciousness, specifically in the West. In India, it's a little bit easier because the culture is there. It should also be there. Western India, that education should be there. That culturing and that giving children Krishna consciousness should be there, raising them nicely. Specifically in the West is very, very important because otherwise it's very easy, and we see this, it's almost ubiquitous that somebody gets a chance of being born into a devotee family, but because of contamination, association with Western culture, they just spoil it in different ways. Of course, they may not fully spoil it. They may still come around the temple, but they may not chant 16 rounds. They may not read the books. They may have illicit sex quite often. They may eat karmi grains. They may not take things so seriously. So they may have a good opportunity, but that risk of spoiling the opportunity is always there. Therefore, even though one gets this exalted birth, as Prabhupada makes this, he makes this point in his purport to this 641, this one takes birth in an aristocratic or pious family of elevated transcendentalists. So it's possible, even though one gets such a birth, to spoil it by these things. So we should prevent this as much as possible. And there's different ways to do that. One thing is establishing a culture of Krishna consciousness, our own culture. At least within India, I see that devotees have their own culture. Well, the culture at large is, we can say, Vedic culture, or it is Vedic culture. It is like that. Within India, it's like that. So it's within the mainstream culture. Here in the West, it's a little bit different because the outside culture is one thing, our own culture is another thing. But I see particularly that those communities who have tight-knit groups, they tend to have a high retention rate, in other words. Just like if you take the Amish, for example, it's a very tight-knit group, and we don't particularly hear people converting to becoming Amish. Maybe some people, but Amish isn't the most rising religion that I've seen like that. But they retain a lot of people because the children are given a good upbringing, and they care for their children. It's a very loving atmosphere, and the culture is there. So devotees need their own culture and not to compromise with the outside culture. It's a bigger conversation, but the more we invite Western elements into the temples and compromise the pure Vedic culture, to that extent, we also compromise our ability, or the lives of our children, actually. It's true. The more we introduce things like rock music into the kirtan, the more our children are compromised like that. And consequently, those children carry on the sampradaya. And things degrade. So yeah. Also, another point, I'm just speaking in general terms, I've seen a very practical thing. Those centers which have some sort of facility to take care of children, generally they grow. If you look at it, those centers who have some sort of gurukul or even just some school like that, they tend to grow like anything. And many devotees come there. Of course, we're not about gathering devotees, but I'm just making the point in terms of propagation of Krishna consciousness, carrying it on, because people understand like this. The majority of the movement of society are grihastas. Renunciates are generally a small part, but we should consider these things as necessary for the survival of the Krishna consciousness movement. Another point, child is the father of man. The children will carry forward the movement. Of course, new people will always come into Krishna consciousness. It's not that we ever, at any point, give up spreading Krishna consciousness. Different devotees have different services, and also within devotee children, they should also be taught the importance of spreading Krishna consciousness. Sometimes it's that sometimes you see devotees grown up within the movement, but they don't have such a preaching spirit. They don't fully understand the spirit of Lord Chaitanya, actually. I can say a little bit more words on this a little bit later, in a minute. But first, one thing I wanted to make the point is that children won't automatically be Krishna conscious. Sometimes it's, at least historically, it's been assumed like that. You just do Garbhadhana Samskara, and then that's it. Your child, you can neglect him as much as possible, and he should just be expected to worship Krishna. It's not always like that. Just like when somebody new comes to the temple, we put in a great deal of effort to cultivate them, and it takes a great deal of effort to come to the point of Krishna consciousness for those people. So similarly, too, it takes a great deal invested within a child, just like we were mentioning these samskaras, many other things. There's many other things. But the overall point is that they too have to be Krishna conscious. They too have to be pushed in one way to be Krishna conscious. Not exactly pushed, but you know what I mean. So they should also equally be given attention to Krishna consciousness and not just assume that you can let them roam freely, etc. like that. There's programs, just like I mentioned in Gurukul, effective way to raise children. We see, for instance, I'm speaking on Nimbarkacharya. He went to a Gurukul. So his traditional system of raising children like this, to study under a guru, imbibe Vedic culture like this, at least for some, study Shastra like this. Of course, there's different varnas like that, and different people are given different education. There's Shudras, there's Brahmanas, there's Kshatriyas, etc. like this. But this education is is very important. We have opportunity to create a very high class of devotees by raising children, actually. I've seen some of the devotees in India, some of the children there, they know English, which is like the Laguna Franca of the world. You go anywhere, you can speak English. They know their local language. They know Sanskrit. They know how to play all the instruments. They know how to sing. They know all the major bhajans. They've memorized the whole Bhagavad Gita. They know more, they're younger than, they're half my age, but they know more verses than I'll ever know in my life. It's a very amazing, now these are devotional opulences. They're not in and of themselves. It doesn't automatically equate one that will be Krishna conscious, but it's definitely a valuable asset for the movement to have these sorts of devotees. If we're going to establish Varnashrama, these sorts of qualities are needed, and especially these, you could say, finer points of Varnashrama. If we're to establish it, there's a whole culture that comes along with it. So many things. There's arts, there's knowledge of different sacrifices, how to chant mantras properly, even chanting Vedic mantras properly is very difficult. But you see these Gurukulis in Mayapur, they're able to do it because they've learned it from an early age. So it's a very good opportunity to create high-class devotees. Understanding Sanskrit from understanding Sanskrit and natively speaking English and being able to translate literatures like that is very, very valuable. Of course, we have translated literatures. Some devotees have learned Sanskrit, and there are good translations out there. Sometimes devotees, because of a lack of knowledge of Sanskrit, they don't get such good translations. It's inevitable like that. But what to speak of somebody who has a knowledge of their native tongue and also a completely high-class devotee. So, of course, these are secondary things. The main thing is Krishna consciousness. And raising children in Krishna consciousness, the main thing to impart to them is that this, in other words, one can still have all these opulences, and it's quite seen that sometimes children are very expert in singing, playing mridanga. They may have even, all these things I mentioned, they may know Sanskrit, but they may not be surrendered to Krishna. They may not be surrendered to Guru, they may not be surrendered to Krishna, and they may not feel a need or urgency to do something practical for the movement of Lord Chaitanya. So this is actually the essence of raising children in Krishna consciousness. We see here, the essence is given here with Vidura, that he was, without deviation of thought, he was always thinking of Krishna. So this is the main thing. Always thinking of Krishna means being also surrendered to Krishna. They go hand in hand in one sense. So the main point is imbibing the sense of surrender to Krishna. Even if one's child doesn't necessarily learn any sort of devotional arts, that's okay. It doesn't necessarily need to be like that. Main thing is raising them as far as possible a pure devotee. And yeah, I mean, a lot could be said by that. Children are generally very impressionable. It's not like I'm sort of expert. I don't have children. So, but at least I see with children, they imitate what they see. All of us have seen this, you know. They're like a sponge, you know. You just give them, however people are acting, they immediately take up that behavior, even if you don't teach them how to do like that. So, the association a child has, how the parents act themselves, is all very, very important for raising children in Krishna consciousness. So, of course, I'm not an expert in these things. I'm just speaking broadly, but I'm just sort of emphasizing. This point here is made that Vidura, because he had this high birth, because he was the son of Vyasa, he was coming, the value of great, as Prabhupada is saying here, the value of great parentage and noble birth is evaluated here. So it's a very, very valuable asset. So we can consider this like this. So I can, in my class there at this point, I've covered a few different things. So I can take anything anybody has at this point, either about acharyas or the festivals. I may not be able to answer so much on that, but, or comments.
Hare Krishna. So I was thinking samskaras, initiation, second initiation, those are pretty significant for us. For those
It is a samskara, yeah.
Yeah, but
Diksha, yeah.
just it seems like that's like the most significant in our lives.
Yeah, that is true, yeah.
More than the vivaha and even the funeral rites, because it's like without that, what are we gonna do? Mm-hmm. So it seems like that, especially our, we're saying like often now initiation is our second birth, and taking initiation from the spiritual master, we're taking a whole new life on.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the point that I was just thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Prabhupada, in the purport here, what does he say at the end?
The birth control thing?
Yeah.
So-called birth control is not only vicious, but also useless. That?
Yeah, it's wild in like modern society that they've convinced the women and the men.
Yeah, it's terrible, actually.
That it's not, it doesn't affect you at all. That everything is completely fine. You just take this one thing and you can enjoy life. But actually, this is the less intelligent position of women and the men in this age. It's just like you don't think they'll have any effect. That you're stopping, like such a significant thing. That the semen, it produces whatever it enters and produces egg. I don't know how it works, I forget. But that it can produce a child, and you stop that whole process, and that's like almost the essence of the body. The body is created for procreation, and you think nothing is going to go wrong. And who do you give that to? You give that to the women, who are generally more weaker than the men. So then in this way you destroy society. And then what comes out later is that the children are deformed or have autism or have all of these terrible things in their minds are messed up, their bodies are messed up. And somehow or other we're completely convinced that this birth control is completely fine and it's perfectly okay. And then so goes along with that, comes along with that abortion and such, that everything is fine. No, it's just some whatever particle or whatever they say nowadays. What do they call it? They don't call it a baby anymore. A tissue. It's a tissue. It's just a tissue. It's just another little thing. But it's like, whoa, it's like pretty demoniac stuff. And you can understand the less intelligent classes of people. It's like the women of the society is like they're taken advantage of by these men. And so then degradation is happening more and more. Now there's a fight back, so then apparently there's a bunch of women that are not going to have sex anymore. And and had formed a society where they're not going to have sex anymore. So because they're fighting against the abortion thing, which works out, right? That's what you want. But anyways, it's like the demoniac society is like people can't see it in their ignorance. It's wild. It's crazy. It's really insanity. Like you think about this, you look if like people of Vedic culture, even my own grandparents, and they were to look at that. My brother's wife, she calls my brother by his name, and my grandma's always shocked. It's like, what's wrong with you? Why are you calling your husband by your first name? What's your freaking problem? Or to speak of them trying to understand abortion and these birth pills and all of this, they must be shocked.
Yeah.
But we think it's normal. It's like. It's wild. Even me, like I thought it was normal until like later, like understanding like the culture and Prabhupada's and reading from Prabhupada's books and all of this. It's a crazy condition.
Anything else?
Oh, I was just we were just actually talking about this. I thought I heard somewhere that it's like sinful if you get married and don't have children or something like that. Because of course there's a lot of great devotees I think of offhand that haven't had children. So.
Well, the purpose of the Grahastha ashram is to have children, in one sense, of course there may be different conditions as to why. It's a complicated question. There may be a condition. I mean, we hear of Vedic kings, for example, who are impotent. They try to have children. I can't remember the names offhand, but they couldn't have children. So it may be a situation like that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know a specific reference, so I won't exactly say it's sinful. Is the dharma of grahastha to have children and like that. Although there's exceptions to dharma in many different circumstances. Just like it's the... Yeah, I mean, just put it like that. It's difficult to say, and different people have their own individual reasons. And you have to see Krishna consciousness too. Generally, the general idea is like this. Sometimes it may be in such a situation that to have children may be detrimental to one's Krishna consciousness. It's not so much the situation now, but it could be so. So, we're talking, Grahastha Dharma is one thing, Parva Dharma is another thing. So I'm not exactly going to paint a situation, but it is maybe something that could come about. possible. But if that could come about, why not get married in the first place? Well, maybe some devotees get married at a very late age for practical purposes, for their own care, being in an old body. There's many devotees who do so like that. They don't have children. Some have been brahmacharis for years. They'll get married at 40, 50 years old. You're supposed to have children at that point. You're supposed to renounce at that point. But the renunciate is marrying at that point. He may have different reasons for marrying. It may be a practical thing, too. And also, there could be an issue with a wife, or the husband even. If the wife is inimical to Krishna consciousness, do you want to raise a child and have the child? If the couple doesn't agree to undergo these samskaras, or it gets very, very complicated. So I wouldn't just paint it as a black and white picture. Generally, the general dharma and the general understanding is that you go into grahastha life, you get married, you have children. I mean, we won't like that because we want to bring people up to Krishna consciousness as a very realisable. I mean, even within grahastha, I mean, there's also so many things that could be said. It's not that a child is always a burden. There's also pleasure in having children. I mean, like raising children specifically, like that. You know what I mean? There's like a taste there because that. So that's also there. So it's not just it's like some sort of austerity like that, but sometimes there's specific reasons why people go about it. Sometimes it may be a sort of done out of sense gratification that I just want to live. I just want to have access to the sense gratification of a grahastha, but I don't want the responsibility of bearing a child. Could be like that. Is not always every case. So yeah, so it's a very like vague answer, but it's a vague. There's so many different cases, you know, of why devotees marry, why people get married, why they don't have children, why they have children. Sometimes people get married, they have children, but they're completely irresponsible personalities. Maybe some people got married, had children, they shouldn't have had children because they weren't so competent in being human beings. So it's a multi-complex question. You have something, Lakshman?
On this point of raising Krishna conscious children, like what is it that determines, you know, I can practice in my life, you know, having the desire to become Krishna consciousness is not guaranteed. We can see, you know, so many like friends, and we are all born in Krishna consciousness, we have, you know, all the facilities, but still, you know, the desire is not always there. So what is it that determines this?
I don't know. You know better than me because it seems like you're taking it seriously. And as Janardhan too, he took it seriously. I don't really know. I know I can only speak from my own experience. Is that I had a bitter taste of the material world. Problem is for many Gurukulis that don't have devotee children. We'll say like that. Gurukuli is a very specific term. One who's gone to a Gurukul. Many devotee children, they don't have a bitter experience of the material world. Rather, they're looking towards the material world and they want to enjoy the material world because they don't know what it's like. They don't know that material world is actually poison. So for many people, coming is a common issue. Many people coming in Krishna consciousness, fresh from the material world, we have this sort of experience. But for those who were raised in society, it's almost like the opposite. What is it? I don't know. Some may just be naturally like that. Just like, for example, I saw when I was in India, many of the older Gurukulis and devotee children as well, they just go on Krishna because that's their culture. That's their life. That's just how they live their life. They never really came to like a resolution, or maybe they didn't need to come to a resolution because there is nothing to resolve. In other words, that's just how you live life. Here in the West, it's like, okay, well, or like taking it seriously, I guess we can take it like that. Well, taking it seriously, what does it mean to take it seriously? Well, you can gratify your senses, or you can live a Krishna conscious life. Basically, you can kind of like dumb it down to that oversimplification. But the more we're associated with Western culture, the more that decision comes in. Therefore, you see many of these Western devotee children, they don't take it seriously because they're overly associated with the Western culture. So that's one consideration. Some people some of those in that situation, they come to the consciousness of, like, oh, hey, there's something. Sometimes they read the books and they understand that there's something in the books. Often, people in such a situation, children in such a situation, they just never understand they're sort of superficially associated with Krishna consciousness. They go into the temple, but they don't know what the philosophy is about. They may have heard it in a class, but they've never actually read even Bhagavad Gita. There are many people I know like this. They're raised Krishna conscious, but they have never read Prabhupada's Gita. So one thing that can kind of like help is actually reading the books. But it's different for different people. But like I said, you know better than me because you have so many friends like that. So I can only speak generally. Yes, you have something. Prabhu can also probably say better. Yeah. It was a Gurukul teacher.
Hare Krishna. Like the point he raised, like why devotee kids, devotees don't have devotee kids most of the times we see. It's again linked with Garbhadan Samskara, first thing, because the way they are procreated, like I remember, like for me, like my parents, they used to serve in this Bhagavad Kathas, where the recitation of Bhagavatam was done for 7 days, and they were sincerely serving. And like in my case, maybe they must have been serving then and heard this, And in my own son's case, I have seen this. Like we read Bhagavatam when he was conceived, and then later part also, the parents have that responsibility to carry further. It's not that he is born, like you raised this point in the Bhagavatam class, that Garbhadan Sanskar alone won't help. Later the parents also have to do their responsibility. Like early in his childhood, we taught him all these verses from the Bhagavad Gita. At 2.5, 3 years, I taught him actually how to take bath, how to cleanse yourself after passing stool, and how to why we should have prasadam. So I never forced him actually. So I told him that this is the way, because until you don't offer it to, and I observed that he never ate from outside, And we did this samskara that you were talking about, seeing the proclivity of the child. So we place various things like food, Bhagavatam we place, then money, and I don't remember land, but then at least these 3 things. Initially he went to grab, the fruits, and later he shifted, and then he grabbed the Bhagavatam. So, and then, but the later part, I gave immense time to him after work, he used to spend reading Krishna book for him and explaining him why we should have prasadam and why we don't eat outside stuff. Everything, the explanation was given to him. It was not, if you force them, then they are not going to, they have to go in a reverse way then. Because for certain time they will accept that. But after some time they will give up, or being in touch with the material world. So, the duty of parents also have an important role. It's not just that you will procreate a child, you are a devotee, and he will become a devotee. How you are procreated, what samskaras you are, we see the case of Abhimanyu, We hear that Subhadra, when she was listening to this and she fell asleep, and then, or the case of Prahlad Maharaj, we know that Narad Muni instructed his mother. So, this all things count actually, and the later part, parents have their duties. And we see many devotees, their children were doing good in Salem Gurukul after growing there, but their parents pulled them out from there, because at old age, who will take care of them? That's what they felt. So, it's the duty of parent. They said, Guru na sayat, Janini na sayat, Mata na sayat, in the 5th canto. So, Guru, you should not become Guru if you can't pull your disciple out of the cycle of birth. So parents also have that responsibility. It's not that you will procreate and they will become Krishna consciousness on their own. You have to guide them. So the basic point is when parents don't do their duties properly, then we may see that although they are devotees, then their kids may not be. They may even turn demonic, because they will go to the opposite end normally. So all these samskara, immediately after my son's birth, the first samskara is done. The first thing is that when the child is born, the father should be there around the mother, so she should feel safe when the child is born. Before that, we read all these scriptures. Even in the Vedic times, when they used to conceive, the husband and wife, everybody knew that they are going to try for conceiving, and it was like a ceremony. It's not for getting sexual pleasure, men and women, they come together and some fruit is born. So it was like a samskara. Before that also they practice austerity. We see the many cases in devotees, how they are born. Their parents did all these samskaras. So these samskaras are important to follow. There is even this Annapashan samskara. After that, this samskara of proclivity is done. Then there is Vidyaram samskara. So that is not for girls. Guru Maharaj doesn't do that for girls, you know. The first akshara is, means the boy writes on a slate or a book. So this all samskaras introduced, and that has a certain time also. But the most important thing in his question is like, the parents have this big role to do, you know. It's like, if they are asleep, then the child is going to be demonic. Yeah.
You brought up two good points. One that's also applicable to your question, Suresh, that the Bhagavatam says one shouldn't become a father or mother if they can't deliver their children. So that's one thing, and that's directly there in Shastra. Another thing, you're making a very good point, in general, is that explanation. If people don't have an explanation, anybody actually, specifically children, they become dissatisfied. This is what happens with Hinduism. They follow the ritual, but nobody explains to them what it is actually. And this becomes something dry. Most of us are coming from a Christian background. I don't know, that happened with me. It seems to happen with most of us. You just go to church. Why? You're not given an explanation. You just do it. But if you explain why, this is why also reading the books is very important, because the explanation is in the books, but it's not just, it's also incumbent upon the parent to give the explanation like that. That's a very good point, yeah. So, Madhujis, do you have any questions? Oh, there's a lot. Okay, yeah. Okay.
First, I had a comment when I was when you were reading the last sentence of the purport. It made me think of the fact that actually also even the materialists also they never claim that any birth control is 100%.
Yeah, that's true actually.
And so that's how I was interpreting it in terms of useless. As you make all these endeavors, but still. And so my question is. So I've personally heard from Western Gurukulis that one thing that they feel some kind of resentment towards their family, their parents, in regards to feeling like they were abandoned in the process of being sent to Gurukuls. So I was just wondering if you could speak about what a practical application of Srila Prabhupada's Gurukul ideals looks like in regards to the interactions between the parents and the children.
Yeah, one thing is that okay, well, there's some history comes into play. Previously, it's there, that traditionally, even now, I see Gurukuls in India amongst our godbrothers, they operate like that. At least some, it's not necessarily, sometimes the parents are there, sometimes the parents are living in the community, but the child may be living in the Gurukul, or sometimes the child is sent to a Gurukul and the parent may be somewhere else. It's traditional, it's proper like that. The issue comes with when the child is restricted and historically what has happened, when the relationship between the parent and the child is completely suppressed or just broken, basically, on the sense of that, actually, that's not your father and that's not your child. The child needs that. Every individual, it's a natural thing. You can't break that. Historically, what's happened within the society, ISKCON, is that the initial Gurukuls were like that, and also the initial Gurukuls, the Gurukuls themselves, a lot can be said, but they weren't inculcating, the education wasn't so good, and also the treatment of the children was quite horrible, actually. It wasn't a loving and caring atmosphere. Even one goes to a Gurukul, it's not that the guru is some sort of heavy, maybe like that sometimes, but it's not there's a cognizance that you're dealing with children as well. So the application, it can be like that, different. It's not that everybody goes to a Gurukul. Shudras don't go to Gurukul, even historically within a Vedic culture like that. So it's not that everybody goes to a Gurukul. Women also, girls don't go to a Gurukul, so they're also raised in another way. But I would say, just making a succinct point, is that the central thing is that the child needs a relationship with the father and the mother, especially the mother. When that is cut, it adversely affects the upbringing of the child. Yeah, specifically at an early age too. They go to Gurukul, but even we see, I think from the age of 5, not still that love is given there from an early age, And even traditionally, it's not that Gurukul it was sent halfway across the country. It may be like that. And he may come to that at a later point in his life, being like that, the child, depending on the proclivity of the child. But and each individual case is varied like that. But I'm just making the point. The central point is that relationship shouldn't be neglected. The child shouldn't, because when it is that what you're saying, that child feels betrayed and they feel left by their parents. But I know many children, they're in Gurukul, their parents are somewhere else in India, and they love their parents, they love being in a Gurukul, they have a fantastic experience because the relationships are very, very nice, both with the teachers in the Gurukul, devotees in the temple, and their parents. So it's a very, very important aspect. Has gone awry historically. Okay, maybe I can take one more, if it's still there.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. A very nice point you said that after Garbha Sanskara, also the child needs care to raise for devotion. The same point you said for the new person also, like the person coming in the temple, and it's important to raise them in devotion, in Krishna consciousness. So my question is, what are the duties of the devotees who are already in the temple, and how to help them to raise them in Krishna consciousness?
What, you're speaking children or new people coming in?
New people.
New people, well, it's different depending on that each individual devotee's relationship. It can't be expected necessarily like the temple president will have like complete like, especially if it's a bigger temple, that he'll necessarily be interacting with new people. Sometimes the reality new people, sometimes new people come and they're out the door even before the morning program, means they bloop before the morning program is over. Sometimes it's like that. It's happened many times actually. So, but it's different depending on different devotees, depending on the devotee's relationship. Generally, it should be respectful, encouraging, be sensitive to the person. This is like a separate topic, but also accommodating. We can't expect new people, somebody fresh for coming in, even some weeks or months, to follow everything to the same level as a full-time devotee may. They may be neglecting some aspects of Vedic culture. They may drink water, but they may touch the thing to the water to their mouth. They may go on chant japa with that same hand. So we just have to be a little tolerant because people can get fried out, basically. Of course, it's not that we don't eventually tell people these things, but it's a very gradual thing like that. Generally, I mean, at least here, and I see also other temples, there's generally either somebody over working with new people, or if not, and sometimes too, new people, they have like a specific person they're kind of like attached to or have like a good relationship to. Somebody that's cultivating them, in other words. They come to the temple, they hang out with that person, in other words. So the principal, you could say like liaison, is like through that devotee, basically. And it's generally good to like interact with that devotee, like, in other words, if somebody is coming here, I have a very good relationship with some new person that's coming here, and somebody wants to, whatever, like interact or correct, say something like that. Like, in other words, it's not that devotees in the temple are just like suggesting, say, I don't know, one devotee is cultivating one person, and then some random brahmachari comes and tells this new guy, hey, just drop out of the temple and join like that, when like he hasn't been interacting with the guy at all. So it just requires a little bit of sensitivity, basically. Of course, general mood is like being accommodating towards new people because it's difficult, especially new people taking up Krishna consciousness. So, I mean, in my own situation, it's difficult. Most of us have experience. It's not just overnight you surrender like that. So we should also be very accommodating and understanding like that. It takes time for people to come up. Okay? So we're grossly over time. So Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.